Let's continue with Module 1, Section 2, Reporting Services Architecture. Let's take a look at the information that we see on page 14. Reporting services available in the Standard Edition, the Enterprise Edition, the Developer Edition, and it's in a limited format with the SQL Server Express Edition with Advanced Services, and also with the SQL Server Web Edition. If you would like a complete breakdown of the features supported by each of these editions, you can see there's a feature comparison website, the URL on the bottom of the screen. Or you can simply go to a browser such as Chrome or Bing and simply do a search on SQL Server Reporting Services Feature Comparison, and you'll find a web page. Let's talk about the different type of reports that we can create. Inside a reporting services report, we can create a tabular report. It means you're creating a report that displays the data laid out in rows and columns, so it looks like a spreadsheet. You can implement grouping by using a tabular report. You can also add headers and footers. The headers can display summaries or labels, and the footers can also display summaries or labels. We can also implement something called drill through. This gives us the opportunity to make a piece of information on one report clickable. And so when you click it, you can pass that piece of information you clicked on as a parameter and navigate to another report. So you might have a report that shows summary information, and you click on a piece of information like a order ID or a project ID, and then it can drill through to another report that shows detailed information about that order or detailed information about that project. We also have parameterized reports. Parameterized reports give us the opportunity to create a report that takes a parameter. A parameter is nothing more than a placeholder. And so I can have as many parameters as I want. I believe the limit is 2100. So imagine a parameter that works with dates. And so I can have a report that displays order information, but the order information you see is based on the date you pass in. You might have a parameter for the start date and a parameter for the end date. So if I was to pass in April 1st of 2022 as the start date and April 10th, 2022 as the end date, I would see the orders for that 10-day range. You might have a parameter for a project ID, a product ID, a customer ID, a country. It's entirely up to you. If you've worked with stored procedures or functions in SQL, then you're familiar with parameters. We'll show you how to work with parameters in Module 5. We can also work with what are called linked reports. Linked reports give us the opportunity to put a piece of information that's clickable on one report and link to another report. And so you might have a need to take multiple reports and allow users to click on various aspects of the report and then use the links as a navigation aid. We can use actions to allow linking reports together. You'll see an example later when I show you how to use actions and how we can link reports together. Another report would be a matrix report. The matrix object that we put inside a report is very similar to the tabular report. The matrix report is designed to display summarized data values only. A tabular report shows detailed information as well as groupings and summaries. The matrix report only shows summarized information. The matrix report is very similar to a pivot table inside Excel. Although we cannot take our mouse and move things around, we can use the matrix report to create a nice two-dimensional summary presentation of data. We can implement one or more levels of grouping. But you're always going to see summarized data. You're not going to see any detailed data in the matrix. You'll see an example of the matrix report later. We could also decide to display the data visually by using charts and graphs, bar charts, column charts, pie charts, and different type of visual elements. So you might have data that you want to present as a table, but you also might want to display that same data in a pie chart or a column chart or a line chart. There can also be complete standalone reports, or you could have a report that displays information laid out in a tabular format, and then on another page, information laid out as a matrix. And then if you continue to scroll down, you might have some information laid out as charts. And you can have as many different charts in the same report as you want. You might have one report that displays one chart, or you might have one report that displays multiple charts. It's entirely up to you. Let's talk about the BI semantic model on page 17. The business intelligence semantic model. When it comes to building a data model with SQL Server analysis services, there are two different types of data models that we could create. We could create tabular data models or multidimensional data models. We'll talk more about this if you're with me for the one-day presentation of analysis services. We're also going to talk about the business intelligence semantic model in much more detail in Module 7. When you're working with a business intelligence semantic model, you are working with analysis services. The whole goal behind the business intelligence semantic model is to build a data model that not only contains data, but also contains metadata to describe that data. So if I had a business metric called total sales, how would you like to look at total sales? You might want to look at total sales by the month of the year. You might want to look at total sales by the country where our customers are located, or by a specific customer, or by a particular category, or by a specific product. For example, you might want to run a query that says, I'd like to look at total sales by geographic area. Could be South Beach, Miami. The product could be heavy wool sweaters, and the month could be July. So you're curious about how heavy wool sweaters in South Beach, Miami are selling in the month of July. You need to determine whether or not you want to continue to stock that product. Tabular data models were introduced when SQL Server 2012 was released, but tabular data models actually predates SQL Server 2012. Tabular data models were actually originally introduced back when we had the Power Pivot add-in for Microsoft Excel. I believe that was Microsoft Office 2010. Tabular data models are often much smaller than multidimensional data models. And tabular data models use a memory resident engine known as VertiPack. Tabular data models use a data resident engine and also compression. So the data models are housed in memory and they're compressed. Tabular data models can respond, in some cases, hundreds of times quicker than retrieving data from a two-dimensional relational database. When you're working with the dimensional models, depending on what model you decide to design in, if you're working with a multidimensional model, you can use the MDX expression language. The MDX expression language can be thought of as SQL for cubes. The tabular data model not only supports MDX, but it also supports data analysis expressions. Data analysis expressions is commonly referred to as DAX. Let's move forward. Here's the reporting services architecture. You can see right up here we have the end user. The end user is going to use a browser, and they're going to navigate to a URL. And this URL is going to be the URL for the report server. And that report server is going to be hosting different type of reports. These reports can be organized into different folders, and permissions can be granted to the entire folder or to an individual report. So the user only sees what they have permissions to see. So if the user doesn't have permission to see, let's say, a folder called sales, they won't see the folder called sales. When they click on a report, that's going to send a request from the reporting services instance into the database hosting that data. The database hosting that data could be Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, could be a location from the web. There's a variety of different data sources that could be used to put data into a report. Anytime that we build a report and we publish that report, metadata is actually housed inside the report server database. The report server database is a database that resides on a Microsoft SQL Server database engine, and it contains every report that you've deployed, every folder you've created, and all the configuration information for the reporting services environment. As users are connecting to the reporting services, interacting with the reporting services environment, the report server TempDB database stores information about generated reports and information about reports that have been viewed. Both of the report server and the report server TempDB database must be housed on an instance of Microsoft SQL Server database engine. Please be aware that the report server and the report server TempDB database that I'm pointing to right now, they do not host the data. They don't host the sales data or the manufacturing data that you'll see inside your reports. The sales data or the manufacturing data could be coming from Oracle, IBM DB2, Microsoft Access, Excel workbooks, things of that nature, or other Microsoft SQL Server databases. Reporting Services has an XML web service. The purpose of the XML web service is so that developers can create their own custom .NET web applications to plug into the report server. It just happens to be that Microsoft has provided a web interface, a web application to get us started. You don't have to use the Reporting Services web portal to gain access to the reports hosted on an instance of Reporting Services. You can create your own custom application. So if you wanted to have the reports hosted on SharePoint, you could. If you wanted to have the reports hosted inside your own custom web application, you could. The Reporting Services integrates with Visual Studio, so we can use the Visual Studio environment to plug into the report server so we can publish our reports. You can see right here where I'm pointing to, it says BIDS or SSDT. BIDS is short for Business Intelligence Development Studio. It's the old name by which we used to refer to the development environment to build reports. The new name is SQL Server Data Tools. Now in 2019, we simply call it Visual Studio 2019. When you're inside Visual Studio 2019, you created a report project and you're ready to deploy. We can specify this URL that you see right here, http://server name report server. And this is the URL that we would use to actually publish our report projects that we create inside Visual Studio. So this is the architecture. In Module 8 and 9, we're going to take a look at using the Reporting Services web portal and show you how we can gain access to the reports hosted on an instance of Reporting Services. We're also going to explore the report server database so you can actually see the content that's published there. Right now I'm going to take you to the Reporting Services database, and you can see there's not much there. So I'm going to go to my machine. I'm going to go to my SQL Server Management Studio, and here's the report server database. The report server database is one of the two databases that makes Reporting Services run. So if I see the report server database, I see it's on a machine called Student. So the machine called Student is acting as a Reporting Services report server. And if I go down to tables, you can see there's a bunch of tables there. One of these tables is called Catalog. And if I right click on it and I choose Select, I can see everything we've created. You see there's not much there. But as I start creating reports and folders and I start publishing them, we will see this table start to fill up. There is a column over here called Content. And when you create a report and publish it, in the Content column you will see some binary data, a bunch of ones and actually you won't see, you'll see a bunch of binary data in that column called Content. It's actually a blob, binary large object data type. And we'll see that later, so I'll show you what it takes. I'll show you what it looks like. We're going to come back to this table and look at it in Module 8 and 9. I'm also going to show you how to make use of this execution log storage table. This execution log storage table contains information about the reports that you've published and how they're being consumed. So if you're curious about who's using your reports, we can look at execution log storage. There's also a couple of views that are variations of the execution log storage table. We'll take a look at those as well in Module 8 and 9. Let's move forward and talk about the information on page 19, Reporting Services web portal. The Reporting Services web portal is created for you when you run through the setup routine. So when you install SQL Server Reporting Services, you have the opportunity to use the Reporting Services Configuration Manager to go ahead and set up and configure the Reporting Services environment. When you use the Reporting Services Configuration Manager, one of the things you can do is you can configure the website as well as the web service. Let me go ahead and launch the Reporting Services web portal for you so you can see what it looks like. The URL that I'm going to use is this URL right here, http:// colon // server name. The name of my server is called student / reports. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my machine that we're using for training purposes, and I'm going to launch Edge. I'm just going to go to a brand new tab at the top of the screen, and I'm just going to type http colon / student / reports, and I'll press the enter key. And you can see that it launches this page right here. This is the Reporting Services web portal. There isn't much there. You can see this folder is empty. Just for demonstration purposes, you can see that I'm going to go to New, and I can create different items. I'm just going to create a folder. I'll create a folder called Training, and I'll go back and I'll go to New, and I'll create a new folder called Sales. And so now I have these two folders available to me called Training and Sales. And let's see where they are. Here they are. Sales and Training. I've misspelled sales, so let's fix that. So let's go to the three little buttons right here. Let's go to Manage. And I'll come here to this property called Name, and I'll simply change this. For some reason I put an R there, and I'll just click Apply. And I'll go back to this title up here. This will take me back to the home page. I can also click on the link called Home. So we have Sales and Training. I'm going to go back to the SQL Server Management Studio. And I mentioned earlier there's a database called Report Server. And if I go to the Tables container, I've got this table called Catalog. And this table called Catalog happens to be this query that I still have open right here. You can see that I'm querying this catalog table. I'm going to rerun this query. And you'll now notice that I've got a record for a folder called Sales, and I've got a record for a folder called Training. This entire website that you see right here is made available as an ASP.NET web service. This entire website, the Reporting Services web portal, what makes it work is all the information inside this database called Report Server, as well as Report Server TempDB. So this website is not based on files that exist on the hard drive. It's based on data that's inside these two databases. And so it's a dynamically created ASP.NET website. We'll come back to it a little bit later. I'm not going to explore it much beyond what we've already done right now. So this is the Reporting Services web portal. You can also see that there's an arrow that allows you to download something. This is where you can download the mobile report publisher if you want to create mobile reports. This is where you can download the report builder. This is where you can download Power BI Mobile. You can also see the user that we're logged on as. We have this cog. If you've used SharePoint before, you've seen that gear, that cog icon. And you can see that we can look at settings, My Subscriptions and Site Settings. We can also see that we have New. We have Upload. So if you have a report you want to upload, we can choose Upload and go navigate for the report. We have Manage Folder. Gives you the opportunity to manage the properties of the folder that you're currently in. And I'll just go back home. Anytime you're looking at a report or a folder, if you see three little dots in the upper right hand corner, if you click on that, it gives you a shortcut menu and you see commands. We're going to look at the Reporting Services web portal in more detail later in the course. The Reporting Services web service. Now if you take a look at this particular URL, it looks similar to what you saw before. http:// server name report server, not to be confused with this one. On the previous page, http:// server name reports. Notice this one says reports, and this one says report server. So what's the difference? This URL right here that says http:// server name report server. That's the URL that you use inside Visual Studio to specify the destination of where you want to publish your reports. The URL that says reports, that's used by humans. You saw me go to Edge a few minutes ago and type in that URL. That will take me to the Reporting Services web portal. So that's used by humans. And this is the URL that identifies the Reporting Services web service. And this is used for identifying the destination of where I want to publish my content to. I'm not ready to use that right now, but later, when we're ready to start publishing reports, you'll see me use this particular URL. Now, if I wanted to, I could actually go to our browser and I can type that URL. There's not much there. I'll take you to the browser and show you that URL, and you'll notice how there's not much there at all. So we'll come back here, get a brand new tab, and I'm just going to type http://student/ instead of typing reports, we're going to type report server. It'll launch a very simplistic web page. There's nothing that we would use this URL for. Let's give it a couple of seconds to load. And this is what it looks like. You can see it's drastically different from this site. So this is human friendly, human usable. So this is the Reporting Services web portal. And once again, this is the URL that we use to get to the Reporting Services web portal. And this is the URL that it just took you to. It does load a website, but it's not usable. There's nothing we can do with it here. So I'll just go to this tab right here. So the URL that I just typed in that takes me here, we actually type this inside Visual Studio because it simply identifies the location of where we want to publish content to. We're not ready to explore it any more beyond what I've already talked about. Later on in the course, when I'm ready to publish content, you'll see me go to the property page inside Visual Studio of a project, and I'll specify this as my deployment path. You're also going to be doing that as well. So what I need you to take away from page 19 and page 20 is that there are two URLs, two websites. One on page 19 takes you to the Reporting Services web portal. This is where humans go, and this is where humans can make use of content. And on page 20, the URL on page 20, second to last bullet point that I'm pointing to right now, this is used by report developers to say, hey, take everything that I've created and publish it to this location. And if I come back here to this page on page 18, you can see that right here is what we're talking about. We've got a person inside Visual Studio building reports and report projects, and they want to publish their content. So there's the URL that we were just talking about. There's that same URL. And this gives them the opportunity to use an application like Visual Studio to plug into that particular web service to publish the content. We'll explore the XML web service in more detail in modules 8 and 9. Let's continue. Let's talk about the Reporting Services databases. I mentioned that we have two databases, Report Server Database and the Report Server TempDB database. And these databases are created by using the Report Server Configuration Manager and configuring and setting up your report server. These two databases store metadata. Metadata is data about data. These two databases do not store your sales data or your marketing data or your manufacturing data. Your sales data, your marketing data, your manufacturing data, that's going to come from whatever databases are storing that data. The Report Server database stores the configuration information of the Reporting Services environment. I created a folder called Sales, another one called Training, and we saw two records show up inside a table. I also showed you a table called Execution Log. So when users connect to the report server and start looking at reports, the execution log is going to create an electronic record of them doing that. So inside the Report Server database is all the data about your configuration settings, and things you've created and deployed. When users are using reporting services objects like reports, information about the sessions and usage information is stored inside a report server TempDB. We also store information about if we've configured report caching. We'll show you how to create report caching later in the course in Module 8. So if I've configured report caching, that information is physically stored inside the report server TempDB database. These two databases can be periodically backed up by the SQL Server or the Reporting Services Administrator, and if needed, restored to recover a reporting services environment. They must be hosted on an instance of the Microsoft SQL Server relational database. Your sales data could be on Oracle. Your manufacturing data could be on IBM DB2. Your project management database might be on Sybase or another instance of Microsoft SQL Server. But these two databases must be hosted on an instance of Microsoft SQL Server. It doesn't have to be the same version of SQL Server that you're using for Visual Studio. So if you're using Visual Studio 2019, the instance of the Microsoft SQL Server database engine has to be at least 2005 or higher. Let's talk about the reporting services lifecycle. So what happens when a user wants to look at a report? Well, so what happens is they go to this URL. You can see that URL again. That URL will take you here. So the user comes here to look at this folder, and they see that we have, let's say, a folder called Sales. They click on it. And inside this folder called Sales, they would see another icon that represents a report. And they would click on it, and then what happens is a request is actually sent from the reporting services report server to the underlying data source. So let's go back to our documentation. Depending on how we have the data source configured, it may impersonate another user account, or it may take that user's user account, the person that clicked on the report, and pass it to the underlying data source. And then the underlying data source will check to see if that user account that is configured in the data source has permissions to gain access to the data. So if a user has select permissions to query tables, the data can be retrieved from the data source and then brought into reporting services. Then reporting services can take that data and combine it with rendering information. Rendering information gives reporting services instructions about how the report is going to be displayed. Is it going to be a table? Are we going to display charts and graphs? Then it's going to go ahead and render the report, combine it with the data, and then present it to the user in an HTML format, which means the user sees it as a web page. At that point, when the user is looking at the report as a web page, they can choose to export it as a Word document or an Excel document or another file format. Let me go ahead and show you what a report looks like hosted on reporting services. I'm going to pause my video for just a bit while I do that for you. So here's what it would look like if a user went to the reporting services report portal and looked at a report. You can see the user is going to go to Sales, and inside Sales they see a report called Basic Custom Orders. They click on it and the report renders. So it's just a very basic, simple report that's using a table. You'll see me build this report later on in Module 2. But we can see that the user can scroll up and down, and they can navigate to the various pages. And if they wanted to see this in a different file format, this icon right here looks like a diskette. You can see they can export it to Excel. We can go and export it to PowerPoint, PDF. So we can export it to Word, different file formats. Let's continue. So that's the end of Section 2. In Section 3, we're going to talk about installation and configuration. And I will see you in Section 3.